In the early hours of October 22, 2015, U.S. Army Delta Force operator Thomas Payne and his team took part in a hostage rescue mission in northern Iraq. Their objective was a prison complex holding more than 70 Iraqi civilians who were expected to be executed shortly. The facility consisted of two multi-story buildings defended by ISIS fighters. The operation required both speed and coordination because the hostages' lives were in immediate danger. Thomas Payne was already an experienced member of Delta Force with more than 13 years of service. In 2012, he had won the Best Ranger competition, a demanding multi-day event that tests participants to their physical and tactical limits. Payne had also deployed repeatedly to conflict zones and completed a wide range of special operations courses, including sniper training, jumpmaster qualifications, and tandem skydiving certification. Earlier in his career, a shrapnel injury in Afghanistan had not prevented him from continuing operational duties. At the time of the mission, Payne was serving as an assistant team leader during a deployment in northern Iraq, where U.S. Special Operations Forces were supporting local Kurdish partner units against ISIS, which had taken control of large areas of the region. The prison in the city of Awija had been under surveillance for days. Intelligence analysts discovered recently dug graves next to the compound, suggesting that the prisoners might soon be killed. Because of this new information, the mission was approved. Payne's team and Kurdish Counter-Terrorism Group, CTG, partner forces boarded U.S. Army Chinook helicopters and flew toward the target just before dawn. The Kurdish CTG unit had previously worked with U.S. forces and was familiar with joint operations. The helicopters landed near the objective in low-light conditions. Payne's team and the Kurdish forces moved quickly toward the outer wall of the compound. The Kurdish troops attempted to breach the wall using explosives, but were unsuccessful. With no time to waste, the Americans used ladders to climb over the wall. As they climbed, enemy fighters opened fire. During the initial movement, Delta Force operator Master Sergeant Joshua Wheeler was struck and critically wounded. Visibility inside the compound was limited due to dust, smoke, and the effects of the explosive breach. Payne's medics separated from the main element to provide aid to Wheeler. Payne led his team toward the first building holding hostages. The Kurdish forces hesitated at first, but Payne and his teammates encouraged them to continue forward. The combined force pushed into the building and met minimal resistance. After breaking through the door and entering the holding area, they found 38 hostages. Many were visibly distressed, but they were quickly moved out of the building and escorted toward a safer area. As the first group of hostages was being evacuated, Payne received a radio message informing him that the assault on the second building was not progressing. ISIS fighters were well entrenched and resisting with heavy weapons, including grenades and suicide attacks. The situation around the second building was significantly more dangerous. Payne led his men toward the second structure, moving through active gunfire. Upon arrival, he and another operator climbed onto the roof in order to suppress enemy fighters who had barricaded themselves inside. From the roof, they took fire from both the building and surrounding areas. Explosions inside caused parts of the structure to catch fire. Thick smoke and flames spread through the upper floors. With hostages still locked inside, time became critical. The longer the fire burned, the greater the risk of civilians dying from smoke inhalation or structural collapse. Numerous attempts by both American and Kurdish forces were required to establish control over the lower floors. Several personnel took casualties during these advances, but the teams eventually managed to gain access to the level where the prisoners were held. Payne moved down to the first floor, located the door holding the hostages, and saw that it was secured with a heavy lock identical to the one he had cut in the first building. The hallway outside the door was already filled with smoke, and visibility was extremely poor. Payne grabbed a set of bolt cutters and ran to the door, exposing himself to both enemy fire and the worsening conditions inside the building. He cut the first lock, but had to immediately withdraw to get air, as the smoke and heat inside the building were overwhelming. There was a second lock that still had to be cut. A Kurdish soldier attempted to break it, but was unable to. Payne went back into the smoke-filled hallway, cut the second lock, and opened the door. With access established, U.S. and Kurdish forces entered the rooms, cleared them of threats, and began moving the hostages out. During this process, another radio transmission came through. The building was structurally unstable and could collapse at any moment. All forces were ordered to exit immediately. Payne knew there were still civilians inside. He returned to the building despite the danger and helped evacuate confused hostages who did not understand what was happening. After getting a group out, he returned 2 more times to ensure no one was left behind. Only once he confirmed the building was fully cleared did he notify his team leader that evacuation could begin. As the group moved away from the prison, ISIS fighters continued firing at them. The soldiers shielded the hostages by placing themselves on the left and right sides of the movement formation. However, every time the Americans returned fire, the hostages stopped moving out of fear, slowing the withdrawal. To maintain momentum, the soldiers decided to stop returning fire unless absolutely necessary, even though this exposed them to greater risk. When they finally reached the landing zone, another problem emerged. The number of freed hostages was larger than originally estimated, and it was unclear whether the helicopters could carry the additional weight. After a rapid assessment, it was determined that everyone could fit, though conditions would be cramped. Soldiers remained standing to make room for all hostages on the flight back to Erbil. In total, 75 hostages were rescued. 20 ISIS fighters were killed and 5 others captured during the assault. Once back in Erbil, all rescued civilians, Kurdish partners, and American personnel were accounted for. The mission was considered one of the most significant hostage rescue operations conducted by U.S. Special Operations Forces in recent decades. For his role in the mission, Thomas Payne was awarded the Medal of Honor in September 2020. He became the first living Delta Force operator to receive the award. The only previous Delta recipients were Master Sergeants Gary Gordon and Randy Sugart, who received the medals posthumously for their actions in Mogadishu in 1993. Master Sergeant Joshua Wheeler, who had been fatally wounded during the initial breach, was recognized posthumously with the Silver Star. He had been leading from the front throughout the assault before he was hit. The mission demonstrated the coordination between U.S. Special Operations Forces and Kurdish partners, as well as the willingness of personnel to operate in dangerous environments to prevent the execution of civilians.